about on the last meeting was, you know, you're saying that I was talking about open space and species that have been affected. What was being addressed were the sea lions and seals at the cove, as well as the birds in Mission Bay that have been you know, harassed, and many of them are, the eggs and different things are being you know, cracked, and you know, we're not, you sit there and you want to preserve open space, but then when we have things that are right in front of our face, like the sea lions and seals and the pups dying, and then birds dying from interactions with people, you can't sit there and preserve open space for like gnat catchers and different things like that. We need to be addressing these issues immediately, and so it doesn't continue to happen.
Thank you for those concluding remarks. And Chair, with no other hands in the virtual queue, that concludes public testimony.
All right, I'll turn it over to the committee members. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes or corrections? So moved by the Vice Chair.
A second.
Seconded by Council President. Sarah, please call the roll.
Council President, if you can please register your vote.
Sorry. And that does pass 3-0 with Councilmember Campbell absent. We'll now take up non-agenda public comment. The council members respect and appreciate the public's input and are fully committed to protecting every participant's free speech rights at council and committee minutes, at committee meetings. Sarah, please proceed with non-agenda public comment.
Thank you, Chair. Per Rule 2.7, non-agenda public comment is an opportunity for members of the public to comment on items that are not on the agenda but are within the subject matter jurisdiction of this committee. Each speaker will have 2 minutes. If you have already joined the Zoom webinar online or by phone, please raise your hand if you wish to speak. If you are in person, please come up to the reserved seats at the front of the room when your name is called, and be prepared to come up to the lectern in the order called. If you need to participate by telephone, you may dial 1-669-254-5252, inputting webinar ID 160-670-8143#. This information is also available on the agenda and it will appear on the screen during the public comment period for each agenda item. Members of the public who wish to provide virtual testimony must enter the virtual queue by raising their hand before the queue closes. As a reminder, the queue will close when the last virtual speaker finishes speaking, or 5 minutes after in-person testimony ends, whichever occurs first. If you wish to speak virtually, please select the raise your hand button or press *9 by phone, and I will announce when it is your turn to speak. We will begin testimony here in the committee room with Ms. Joy Sunyata. If you could please approach the lectern, you will have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Sarah. Joy Sunyata, District 3. Does anyone under the sun of San Diego know what is going on with the San Diego-Tijuana sewage pollution crisis? Each road leads to a nowhere solution, with each silo along the way lacking accountability and transparency. And just this week, a hazmat team was called in amid toxic gas concerns in Imperial Beach over the border. In my opinion, it's not the water that is polluted. All parties need to turn around and review their environmental policies. Then collaborate on how to align them for the good of all the people of San Diego and Tijuana. Perhaps at the upcoming World Design Capital 2024 2-day policy conference in November, that's this November, such an interdependent policy will be designed, then steps taken to implement that design and begin to truly solve our pollution on the San Diego-Tijuana border. Thank you so much. Love to all.
Thank you for your testimony. Our next speaker here in the committee room is Ms. Lori Saldana.
Thank you, and thank you for the excellent questions, Ms. Sunyata. As a plaintiff in a lawsuit 30 years ago to try to change the design of that treatment facility, and as a research fellow at UCSD, Center for U.S.-Mexico Studies, I'm well aware of the limitations that we have and what we can do as a city. But discussing that is one of our rights, and increasingly, we don't have the right to discuss complicated things at these committee hearings or at the city council because they're being put on consent. And if you're not happy hearing from the public, then this is what you do, what Sean Elo has done. At the meeting on Monday, he put the majority, over 40 items on consent, consolidated them into the consent agenda. 90 minutes was spent on proclamations, resolutions, things that the public was not allowed to speak on unless they took their 3 minutes allotted for the entire consent agenda to address the 42 items. There was one item pulled. Thank you, Ms. Von Wilpert. You had to pull that in order to oppose it. In order to vote no, the consent agenda had 43 items. One was pulled. There was one vote. A motion was made to approve all 42 items without discussion, without presentation. That's millions of dollars going out that taxpayers will never know with certainty based on presentations where it's going or what value it might have to them in their lives. So over $200 million in increases beyond original contract costs were approved in one vote. $960,500 worth of legal settlements were approved in one vote. And one of those involved constitutional violations and personal injuries arising from an interaction with a San Diego Police Department officer. The public had a total of 3 minutes to address all of those millions of dollars in costs and constitutional violations. 3 minutes is all Sean Elo Rivera is allotting the public to speak on those things. Please don't be consistent with that, Mr. LaCava. Efficiency is not always democratic.
Thank you for your concluding remarks. And that does conclude public testimony here in the committee room. So I will begin the 5-minute timer for all those to indicate if they wish to speak to non-agenda public comment. We will begin with user named iPhone. I've given you permission to speak. If you can please unmute yourself and provide your testimony, you will have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chair LaCava and council members. My name is Becky Rapp. I'm a parent and a member of my planning group. I come today to share with you a recent article in the UT titled, "Smoke-Free Apartment Living is Best for Everyone in San Diego County." The article describes secondhand smoke as the smoke or vapor exhaled by the tobacco user. Secondhand smoke kills 50,000 people every year in the US and contains over 7,000 chemicals, including 70 known to be cancer-causing. Secondhand smoke can be inhaled in a variety of ways, but the most common way is in your own home. A home that shares walls and ventilation systems like apartment complexes and condos. 65% of the air in one home can travel into adjoining homes. This takes place as one neighbor smokes and the vapor then travels through windows, doors, ventilation ducts, and all other access points, causing the non-smoker neighbor to suffer the consequences. I bring this to your attention as there is a solution to the problem. And the city of Carlsbad has led the way by implementing a policy making all multi-unit housing 100% smoke-free. When surveyed, the overwhelming majority of San Diego residents support smoke-free housing policies. Property managers, healthcare providers, law enforcement, and environmental advocates also agree that smoke-free housing is a great solution. A resident has the right to smoke, but residents do not have the right to impose their smoke on others. Carlsbad paved the way, and I would like to ask this committee to consider following their lead and creating a policy protecting all residents, supporting everyone's right to live a smoke-free life. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Our next speaker is Madison Rapp. If you can please unmute yourself and provide your comment, you will have 2 minutes.
Hi, my name is Madison Rapp. I am here to share the harms that vaping has on the environment. I have 4 younger sisters, and 2 of them are stuck in the daily habit of vaping. Vaping has overtaken conventional cigarettes as the most frequent form of nicotine consumption among 15 to 24-year-olds. Vapes harm not only the consumer's health, but also have a detrimental impact on our planet, and few people seem to be aware of this. Currently, the most predominant vapes on the market are single-use, disposable products designed to appeal to younger people. Despite their short lifespan, vapes are complex products that contain several valuable resources. However, there are no practical means to collect or recycle vapes. Most end up as electronic waste or e-waste in landfills. Some are simply thrown on the street as litter. Overall, single-use vapes are clearly wasteful of resources and dangerous to the environment. The EPA considers liquid nicotine acute hazardous waste. This means products containing liquid nicotine cannot be thrown away into the regular trash or recycled without harming the environment and people. Vapes are considered hazardous waste for two key reasons: nicotine and battery content. Nicotine is toxic to humans if consumed or absorbed through the skin or lungs, but it can also poison wildlife and pollute our soil and water. Batteries and vapes in general are hazardous waste if not disposed of properly. It is important for people to understand the harms that these single-use vapes cause, not only to their individual health, but also to the environment. Thank you for letting me share this concern.
Thank you for your testimony. Our next speaker is the original. Please unmute yourself and provide your comment. You will have 2 minutes.
It's pretty disturbing what's happening down in the Tijuana River Valley and the people in Imperial Beach and the areas surrounding that are having to deal with the health effects and consequences of breathing in poisonous chemicals, toxic gases, and of the like. And it's a problem that's been in the making for decades. And there's getting more attention on it now, but it's sad to see that the people are having to suffer in a very extreme manner just to even live down there. And they can't even open windows. They're having so many health issues. We have the board of supervisors, Marcus, who is doing the press conference and saying that it smells bad, but it's safe. And then the next day saying that that she was very concerned about the health problems that could possibly be coming forward from it. And so, it's kind of leads me into, with all of the things that you guys want to do for the to save the environment by bringing in other toxic things like lithium batteries and electric vehicles or of the like. You're not testing what kind of radiation this kind of technology is actually emitting to the people. And so, the more you push to have, this kind of green new technology coming forward, it's like sacrificing the people and their health in order to push an agenda and, worship your climate god that you are, pretending that we're going to save the planet with. So you need to be making sure that you're not putting people in danger for another 30 years until you want to maybe fix the problem after you find out that people are dying or having issues from radiation poisoning. So you need to look into all of those technologies and the health effects of it.
Thank you for those concluding remarks. The 5-minute timer has concluded. We have 1 hand remaining in the virtual queue, and we will take no callers beyond this remaining individual. Judy Strang, if you could please unmute yourself and provide your testimony, you will have 2 minutes.
Good afternoon, Environment Committee. Thank you. And thank you, Sarah. I wanted to speak about how important that it is that this environment we all live in is safe and healthy for all of us. And something that has continually come up at our PTA meetings, where I'm the Coastal PTA Council Vice President legislation, is the issue regarding billboards. And I've often been asked, how come we have to see billboards for marijuana? We don't see billboards for tobacco or alcohol in San Diego. In fact, we've had a lot of success in San Diego regarding removing those billboards that we in the city feel present concerns. And the language from that Supreme Court ruling was community aesthetics or traffic safety. And I'd like to suggest that a prolific amount of billboards regarding marijuana really interferes with our regard for good traffic safety measures and policy. And do we also realize how blatant billboards are for young people that suggest that a form of relaxation, diversion, or digression, that what would be acceptable is to use marijuana products? Is that really a message that is wise, where we care about the health outcomes for our young people, particularly when you think about mental health? As a UCSD epidemiologist said recently, a burgeoning public health crisis is only starting. as lawmakers, do not rein in for-profit addiction industries like tobacco, marijuana, and those who are producing CBD products that are part of our landscape these days. Let's take a new look at what environment and your committee could do to protect our young people and get rid of billboards. Thank you.
Thank you for those concluding remarks. And Chair, with no other hands in the virtual queue, that concludes non-agenda public comment.
All right. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you to everybody that called in or spoke today. We'll move on to committee members, mayoral staff, city attorney, and independent budget analyst. Do we have any comments? Vice Chair.
Thank you. Just one comment to follow up on your opening remarks, which are beautiful about how it's workers who put all these projects together. I know that one of our workers was killed on the Pure Water project tragically in a trench collapse. I went to the site. It was in Scripps Ranch by my house and saw the union leader there comforting people and other workers. So I know it's still something we're figuring out. OSHA's been there, the DA's been there. It's nothing to discuss today, just a memory of Mr. Gomez and his work. He was only 27, and I know so many in this room have been deeply affected by this loss and how much you care about the work that is being done. So I just want to acknowledge his loss and thank you for all you're doing to rally around his family. So thank you.
All right. Thank you for that. I'll offer a couple of comments as I promised at our July meeting on several things that are happening in one could argue in the environment world. There was some questions raised about whether sports lighting at Memorial Park, in fact, was a subterfuge for surveillance installations. And we did double and triple check it. Sometimes sports field lighting is just sports field lighting. We have a very strong trust ordinance, and if any new surveillance cameras are going to be introduced, there is a process for the public to become aware and to offer comment. Sports field lighting is a good thing that our communities often demand so they can use their sports fields late at night. So I hope that puts that claim to rest. La Jolla Cove continues to be a challenge. We're working diligently internally with multiple departments in the mayor's office to try to figure out how do we keep the public safe and keep La Jolla Cove open for recreational purposes. We've actually reached out to NOAA, who is actually responsible for the Marine Mammals Protection Act, and even the Tourist Authority, in trying to send a message to visitors and tourists who do not understand the danger of trying to take a selfie with a 400-pound wild animal. We're also thinking about the very tragic, and I had to say that in the context of what the vice chair said, but the multiple bird deaths that happened in Mission Bay around the 4th of July. There's been a lot of concern about whether it was an after effect of the SeaWorld fireworks. We're not sure whether that's causation, correlation, or coincidence. There was a lot of activity around the 4th of July weekend that all could have contributed to that, but we continue to look at that. And our office continues to talk with SeaWorld about their fireworks program. And last and certainly not least, some of you may have heard a few months ago about extraordinary vandalism to destroy least tern habitat in Mission Bay. And unfortunately, there was absolutely no evidence left behind. There was no cameras out there, so we have no idea who did it. They got away with taking something that actually cost us a lot of money to create on Mission Bay, but that habitat has been, I don't know if it's been thoroughly disturbed and destroyed, but it will take some effort to restore that least tern habitat. But unfortunately, after conversations with the police department, there's just no clues for them to go on and pursue that. So it's rather unfortunate. I'll mention here, do we have any requests for continuance? I will mention that item 8 on the agenda will be returned to staff. It needs a little more work and polishing. So hopefully that will be ready for the October agenda at Environment Committee. So that is item 8 will be returned to staff. So as to today's agenda, as I've said, first we'll be returning item 8 to staff. We'll take that up in October. I expect to take that up in October. For the remaining items, we'll be taking items in the order as shown on the agenda with one additional exception. Item 6 and item 10 will be presented together following the consent agenda. So again, that's item 6, which is an action item, and item 10, which is an information item, will be presented together because they flow quite nicely together. Again, items 1 through 5 on consent, items 6 and 10 together, and then we'll go to items 7 and then item 9. So with that, Sarah, please introduce items 1 through 5 on the consent agenda.
Thank you, Chair. Item number 1 is as-needed consultant services agreement with SCS Engineers for compliance with applicable greenhouse gas regulations at the City of San Diego landfills. Item number 2, second amendment to the grant agreement with the County of San Diego for lead hazard investigations and elimination services. Item number 3, Pure Water Program, amendment number 3 to the agreement with CH2M Hill Engineers for design engineering services for the North City Water Reclamation Plant expansion and influent conveyance project. Item number 4, North City Water Reclamation Plant expansion authority to approve construction change order in the amount of $16 million and extend the construction contract beyond 5 years. And item number 5, North City Pure Water Facility authority to approve construction change order in the amount of $11,360,000 and extend the construction contract beyond 5 years. And if you are watching on City TV or live stream online and you'd like to call into the meeting to speak to the consent agenda, please dial 1-669-254-5252, inputting webinar ID 160-670-8143 #. Chair.
Sarah? Oops. Thank you, Sarah. These items will remain on the consent agenda unless a committee member requests to pull the item off of consent. Are there any requests?
Chair, if I may request that item 3 be pulled from the consent agenda.
All right, so item 3 will be pulled off of consent. We will take item 3 immediately following the consent agenda. So consent agenda now consists of items 1 and 2 and 4 and 5. With that,
Thank you,
Sarah?
Council President Pro Tem.
Yeah, sure. Oh, absolutely. Please proceed with public comment.
Thank you, Chair. We've received one speaker slip here in the committee room. So we'll begin with Ms. Lori Saldana. And you will have a total of 3 minutes to speak to the consent agenda. And if you can please indicate which item or items you'll be speaking to.
Will I be given time to address item 3 since it's been pulled from consent as a separate agenda item? Yes. All right.
Yes, when item 3 is heard, yes.
All right, thank you. So just so people who are listening or observing this know that this is $44 million worth of changes that are being proposed on consent agenda. I consider these teachable moments that are being lost because no presentation is being given on the value of why we are spending so much on water and treatment. And also it's a teachable moment to reinforce the work that the city continues to need to do to improve employment opportunities with these contractors. And item 1 is a relatively small $1.5 million contract, but they are lacking in diversity in terms of women in management and finance and Asians in science and computers. In item 2, it's a county project, so it's $1 million and there is no opportunity program with the county agency. Item 3 has been pulled. Let's go to item 4. This water reclamation facilities are the result of lawsuits between the Sierra Club, the US EPA, settlements with the city of San Diego. All these were battles fought almost 40 years ago by the Sierra Club and others. And so I'm actually partly responsible for some of these costs as former chair of the Sierra Club and reading some of the settlements regarding the need for reclamation as part of the Ocean Pollution Reduction Act at the federal level. Nonetheless, we're hiring people from Los Angeles to do this work, and we're spending $16 million on this project change order or this increase. Of those 40 employees, they have a lack of African Americans, Latinos, Asian, and women in management and financial services, a lack of Latinos in administrative support on the professional side, and on the trade side. This is a company from Los Angeles County, so it baffles me that they can't find diversity in these areas. They do not, and this one is really astounding. They do not have sufficient Latinos in pipe laying, steam fitting, welding, soldering, and brazing. So why a company from Los Angeles hired to come to work in San Diego cannot find diversity in their employees is something I would encourage San Diego Employment Department to take a look at. Meanwhile, on item 5, again, Pure Water Facility. This is a project, $387 million in total. Today, they're adding a change order for $11.3 million. They lack diversity in areas of Latinos in professional employment and women in management, financial, and professional. If the city is going to continue to spend hundreds of millions of dollars on necessary projects that were the result of litigation, can you please make sure that women and Latinos and African American and Asian residents have an opportunity to benefit from these projects to provide water sufficiently and safely for San Diego? Thank you.
Thank you for those concluding remarks. I'll begin the 5-minute timer for all those in the virtual queue to indicate if they wish to speak to the consent agenda. We will begin testimony with the original. Please unmute yourself and please indicate which item or items you'll be speaking to.
All of them.
Okay, 3 minutes on the clock. Please begin.
Yeah, like Lori's been mentioning, I mean, when you're putting things on the consent that are spending, millions of dollars, these need to have more attention brought to them as far as, even a presentation or whatever, so that the people who possibly aren't going to be reading the agenda and want to know what's going on, so they can possibly just watch the feed of what is happening in these meetings, that you guys need to make sure that you are bring transparent with the people, instead of just, frivolously spending the money and expecting the people to, I mean, you're supposed to have the consent of the people, and that's the problem. But you do a lot of hiding when you put things into the consent and you're spending millions of the dollars of the people's money. You should be more transparent and open and honest and give the people an opportunity to really address what's going on. Am I only having a minute?
No, we'll continue your time.
So, I think that you guys need to think about that going forward, especially with the lawsuits that you guys have, and talking about, all of the exceeding your always not to exceed amounts, different things like that. But it doesn't give the public trust in what you're doing when you just put it in the consent like that and have all of this money that is being spent. So, as far as, the, pure water goes, obviously, it's sad to think that we are, dealing with these problems in the Tijuana River Valley. And then we'll spend millions of dollars, if not nearly $1 billion, to, reclaim water in other areas. But we act like this is an issue that we can't really take care of. And people are having severe health effects from what is going on down there. And so it makes me wonder, is that something where you're going to want to go and reclaim the water in that area and then give it back to the people? Are you going to, do whatever's necessary to make sure that these people don't have lifelong health issues due to the fact that, they're just having to kind of sit in this sewage, all while you're going and taking the sewage from other areas and you're, putting a bunch of chemicals in it, treating it and whatever, claiming that it's pure water, and giving it back to the people. So, everything that you guys do is upside down and inside out. And it's sad because there's a reason why the people don't trust you guys. When you can't be open and honest, transparent, when you have tons of lawsuits that come down the pipe that the people have to actually pay for as well. So you're just constantly costing the people money on a regular basis that then gets wasted and doesn't go towards things like making sure that people don't have to live in, a sewage infested area, or making sure even that we're not going to be given sewage back to us while you're putting all these chemicals in it, and not even addressing the problems with the horses, because you have somebody that is giving you guys the chemicals that you need for these projects.
Thank you for your comment. Our next speaker is phone number ending in 4592. I've given you permission to speak. Please unmute yourself and provide your comment.
Good afternoon, Environmental Committee. My name is Kathleen Lippett. Thank you for letting me speak. I really appreciate item 8 regarding indoor smoking and your concern for the lead chemicals and heavy metals in smoke and exposure secondhand smoke to children and to adults. And with all due respect, I would like to remind you that these same chemicals are also in marijuana smoke, secondhand marijuana smoke, and otherwise, especially in the e-vapes that young people smoke. Nicotine, formaldehyde, acetone, benzene, arsenic, lead, and cadmium as well. So please make sure that you're your policies are consistent across the board, and if you are concerned about lead and secondhand smoke in among workers and among the public, please also oppose consumption lounges for the same reason, or smoking at the farmers market. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
Thank you for your testimony. And Chair, with no other hands in the virtual queue, that concludes public comment on consent items 1, 2, 4, and 5.
Thank you, everybody that called in. I'll turn it over to committee members for question, comments, entertain a motion. Again, we will only be considering on the consent agenda items 1, 2, 4, and 5. Okay, the vice chair has moved the consent. Second. And Sarah, please call the roll for items 1, 2, 4, and 5. And that passes 3-0 with Councilmember Campbell absent. Item 3 off the consent agenda was pulled. Please introduce the item, Sarah.
Thank you, Chair. Item number 3 is Pure Water Program Amendment number 3 to the agreement with CH2M Hill Engineers for design engineering services for the North City Water Reclamation Plant expansion and influent conveyance project.
Did you have specific concerns you wanted to raise, or a full?
An abbreviated presentation would be great if there's just, any essential facts that you think are important for us to hear. I will, if this is helpful, the 2 questions that I'm trying to get to is, why isn't this work already done? And what's driving the costs? I'll have more specific questions probably on those fronts, but that's what I'm trying to figure out. And if there's anything that you'd like to provide via the presentation, that could be helpful.
Thank you, Council President, for the opportunity to clarify the answers to those questions. Elif Çetin, Assistant Director with Engineering Capital Projects, and here with me today is Akram Basyuni. He's the Deputy Director overseeing the Pure Water Phase 1 design and construction components. We have a couple of slides. If you could indulge us, we would like to go over the scope of this amendment. It is a consultant amendment with CH2M Hill Engineers. It is not for the construction of the North City Pure Water Facility. So CH2M Hill Engineering is the engineer of record for this facility. As part of the Pure Water Program implementation, the existing North City Water Reclamation Plant is being expanded to treat an average annual flow of 52 million gallons per day, continuing to serve recycled water customers and providing treated water to the new Pure Water facility. The facility has been in operation for 25 years. Although this is a relatively young age for a structure itself, some of the electrical and mechanical components that need to go through regular O&M processes. And while we are expanding this facility, we need to keep it operational. It's a 24/7 facility. As an engineer of the record, CH2M Hill has to stay with the project per the state regulations until the completion. As the construction of North City Water Reclamation Plant expansion project approaches the 50% completion, it has been determined that a larger level of effort from the engineer of record is required to support a project of this magnitude and complexity that stays operation for 24/7. Previous slide, please. Still. The contractor has to plan their work so that there is no disruption to the ongoing operation and maintenance activities. In some cases, the existing equipment has to be taken offline because they are being replaced, and this requires significant coordination between the contractor, plant staff, and the designer to minimize shutdown impacts to the overall plant operation. Some of these were identified during the design phase. However, it's not possible to identify all the conflicts that may occur in an existing facility during the construction. Communications between the Pure Water facility and the city's other sewer facilities is handled by a distributed control system as deferred as a DCS. A larger and unanticipated effort from the designer has been identified to assist with resolving issues conflicts related to the integration of the new equipment with the existing DCS components, while maintaining the current operation and operating of the preparing the ultimate integration. As the contractor has progressed into various planned process areas, existing infrastructure like chemical feed lines and fittings that needed upgrading have been identified. The contractor has encountered unforeseen dock banks, as is shown on the bottom left picture here. You can see the existing conditions, and the area highlighted in green is where we were supposed to be installing the 42-inch pipe where we run into dock banks that the design had to be modified. Designer has had to prepare design modifications to include new upgrades and resolve on-ground utility interferences like I indicated. Additional amendment scope includes effort to implement partial flow commissioning and operation and maintenance staff training. And as we progress during the construction, we identified there's a extensive need for on-site engineering staff support. The facility is complex and we do need the maintenance 24/7. There are needs to make some engineering calls on the site with multiple disciplines such as structural, mechanical, and plumbing items, and also instrumentation controls. And we do need the presence of the engineer of record on the site more often than what we anticipated. Next slide, please. Just to give you a background on the progress of the amendment, in October 2016, City awarded an agreement to the consultant to perform the design services for the North City Water Reclamation Plan in the amount of $17 million. We did issue the first amendment for $2.5 million to make changes to the original agreement scope to make sure that existing secondary clarifiers were purposed and feasibly utilized. And also there needed to be additional sewer and modeling that need to be conducted to make sure that the integration is smooth. In August 2021, construction began and on the expansion project. In November 2021, City Council approved an amendment number 2 for a total not to exceed amount of $7.2 million for design support services during construction, including the review of submittals and shop drawings and responses requires for the information from the consultant and the contractor for the progress. Throughout this construction, this project and every other project run into supply chain issues that they were present due to COVID and the war in Ukraine. And most of the materials they were identified in the design or the equipment was not readily available. To be able to continue the construction progress, different, if you will, materials, all the equipment had to be selected and reviewed for the implementation compliance by the consultant and also purchased by the contractor. So some of the delays that are you referring to because of this. And in addition, I think with the partial flow commissioning, to be able to keep the entire pure water program on schedule, we adopted the partial flow commissioning. There needed to be some programming, integration, communications that had to be designed by the consultant. That is another component of this change. So with that, we are requesting amendment 3, as I identified on the slides, to do the additional work. It is in the amount of $14 million. $12 million is to perform the work, and $2 million is additional services that will be in the sole control of the city. If we run into any additional unforeseen conditions, we'll be able to utilize the consultant. I would like to indicate that these numbers are reviewed, scrutinized, if you will, with the city team, our consultant that is handling the program management, and any other subject matter experts that are readily available for our use. So with that, I'll open up with the questions.
Okay, and we'll go to public comment first, and then we'll turn it back to the committee. So Sarah, please proceed with public comment on item 3.
Thank you, Chair. We've received one speaker slip here in the committee room. So if Ms. Lori Saldana could please approach the lectern, you'll have 2 minutes to speak to item number 3.
Thank you. And thank you for the report. It's never easy to come before the council and have to explain why the costs have increased. Treating water, getting it to the standards where it can be used not for potable services, but for irrigation, for landscaping, it is difficult and the public relies on it to be done well. it is, I've read through this project, the notes about the increased costs, and I was a presidential appointee on cross-border infrastructure. These are complicated programs. Even on one side of the border, they're complicated. So I don't have any opposition to their efforts to meet regulations and safety considerations with this. I continue to have concerns about an employer that has 140 employees and 99 of them identify as white in the workforce report. I just think that if the city is going to be spending $40+ million for contracting services, we need to find people that reflect the diversity of our region. I was just sent a bill for hundreds of dollars for water because the city messed up on billing for my household. I don't use, my household uses very little water, but being hit with a lot all at once is problematic. And I can only imagine for households that are larger than mine and are struggling to pay the water bills, how frustrating it must be to look at who we are hiring as cities, who we are paying for as taxpayers to do the work on our behalf. They do not reflect our households. They do not reflect our diversity. So I'm just continuing to point this out. I appreciate the report. Thank you for pulling it, Council President. This is a teachable moment for people. There is a cost to having reclaimed water in increasing areas of drought and other climate changes. But please have a more diverse contract workforce.
Thank you for those comments. I'll begin the 5-minute timer for all those in the virtual queue to indicate if they wish to speak to item number 3. And we will begin testimony with the original. Please unmute yourself and provide your comment. You'll have 2 minutes.
Yeah, this just whole project and all the stuff you're doing with that, just like with homelessness, it's like a big old racketeering, money laundering thing. And I'm wondering how much more it's going to cost the people in order to give them back. It's not even pure water. And that's the thing. We talk about drought, and I mean, you guys will sit there and buy water and then you say and sell it. And then you claim that you don't want to have to buy water. So you want to, reclaim this water and then put a bunch of toxic chemicals in it to give it back to the people. And it's disturbing because it's in order to control the people, you have to control the resources. And this is a good way to do it. To sit there and to tell people that the water table is so low. When water comes out abundantly from the earth, it's just like oil. It's an abundant resource. But in order to, control what people do, you're going to tell them the complete opposite and then give people back things that are completely toxic to them. And it's sad to think about because it's like, you don't have to do that. And basically we're just putting money in people's pockets. I mean, how long is this going to take, and how many more times on the agenda are you going to bring forward needing more money, more consultants, more money, more consultants, more whatever? And, it's sad because you could give people back living water that doesn't need to have, toxins put in it. And then while you're calling it pure water. So it's just sad to see how much you guys lie to the people, how much propaganda that you bring forward and act like, this isn't an abundant resource. I mean, why would you buy it and then sell it off if you had a problem? It doesn't make any sense. But it does if you want to control what the people do and, what they're whatever. And the problem is that we're spending so much money just to do that. So much money. And again, you're whatever.
Thank you for those concluding remarks. And Chair, with no other hands in the virtual queue, this concludes public testimony on item 3.
All right. Thank you for those who spoke up. I'll turn it over to you, Council President, since you pulled the item.
Thank you, Council President Pro Tem. Thank you for the presentation that was provided and the staff report. I understand everything you said, but I'm still having a hard time getting to where we're at here. And I think I want to make sure that I understand kind of everything that's happened up to this point. So the initial contract, 2016 for 5 years.
Correct.
Okay.
So if I can add, Council President, originally when this contract was originally awarded, it was planned that we would come back and amend it because it did not have all the components. So the design support during construction was not included. And that's what came in during the second amendment when we first started construction in 2021. And that component is the part that we've underestimated or because of the issues and the unforeseens coming up at the plant during construction. That's why we need to amend that. But the original contract didn't anticipate or include all the costs for support during construction.
Was the council made aware of that at the time?
I would like to say yes. Amy Dorman with PUD is here. I don't know if she has any more background on that, but yes. Because the subsequent action, I think it clarifies on the amendment 2, the full scope of construction support that is needed as part of the amendment 2.
Okay. I guess this is where part of what I'm getting caught up on. There's an initial contract. When a contract comes before us, now if it's made explicit to the council that this is just the beginning of the work, I wouldn't necessarily be opposed to that, but I would also have questions as to why the contract wouldn't include all the work that we anticipate needing to be done. Even if it's in relatively broad terms, it seems odd to just continue amending and amending and amending to the point where we've now doubled both the duration and the total dollar amount that was initially entered into. I know changes happen. It seems that we are very far afield from what that initial agreement was.
So if I may offer, council member, I think it will be correct when I say that this is one of the most complicated projects that entire CIP program is taking under. It's an existing facility that needs to remain operational 24/7. When we set on a desk to design these projects, we make certain engineering assumptions saying that the equipment condition is in let's say that it's functioning at a certain level or operating at a certain level. Most of those items will not be able to identify accurately until we started working on the project. So I would like to say our procedures perhaps anticipate a certain amount of construction support by the designer, but until we go into the facility, until we go through the construction, we don't have an opportunity to see the existing condition of the components. Also, there was no way we could have anticipated all the market conditions that we had to go through during the construction. Being not be able to use the equipment that was specified on the plans, looking for another equipment or the material that could fit within the workings of the existing facility. These are all the challenges. It will be hard to anticipate for all of this with all the trained minds here. I will say sometimes I think it is also a good project management measure to be able to identify the construction support needed by the designer as the project progresses. And we are very clear in communicating that. I cannot speak to the specifics of the Amendment 3, but I think with the anticipations at that time that allocated $7 million was going to be sufficient. But when they made that estimate, there was no way they could have guessed the market conditions, right? All the increases and the changes, and also changes in the wages as well for the consultants. So I would like to say we went through extenuating circumstances when the project is being designed and built, and also the complexity comes with the project. And I would like to turn it over to Akram if you would like to add something.
Sure. It just I wanted to add one thing. In addition, you mentioned, Council President, you mentioned the duration, and part of the duration was there was a lawsuit the city got into, and that kind of put a halt on all the pure water projects for a period of time, close to 2 years. Their design was completed, and then we had delay where there was no work. We couldn't issue construction contracts, and that kind of delayed everything and extended. It's one of the reasons why this contract had to be extended. And one of the reasons why the wages of
the anti-worker lawsuit against
that was the
PLA.
agency also, yes.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct, sir.
Yeah.
If I can just add to that real briefly, Council President, and please correct me if I'm wrong, staff, but just I think part of your question is really about process and how we approach these contracts. Back in 2016, I believe the contract was awarded for design. That means they become the engineer of record and we've got to keep them around. I think there's pros and cons, and there's definitely risks to doing the entire contract all at once with a longer duration, larger amount. That would provide fewer opportunities for us to come back to council and have public and council input on that process as it continues. So I think that's part of what we're talking about here, and definitely up for discussion of how we do that in the future.
Thank you, Randy. Explain to me how the consultant doesn't automatically benefit from slower work on the construction side.
So we have checks and balances in place, sir. So each time, I think the work done by the consultant is closely monitored with the city staff, the project managers. We also have a third-party program manager that are our peer review component as well. So each time, I would like to say we have milestones, like we have for the construction activities. We also have milestones for the consultant to complete. And so they are required to complete the design. 30% is a certain day, 60% at a certain day. To this day, they stayed on schedule for those, right? So the construction.
Sorry, I hate to interrupt. I think
No
what
worries.
I'm getting at is actually not whether or not the consultant is keeping up with the milestones being provided, but it seems that the longer the construction, if they have to be there when the construction is happening, the longer the construction goes on, the longer their contract continues.
Okay. So, well, the contractor actually building the facility, it needs to adhere to the liquidated damages we have per day. Their schedules comes with monitoring I think liquidated damages requirements. So everyone has an intensive to finish the project on time, and there's the overhead of running the project. So I'm not really sure how that will be too correlated, but I think in a design bid build setting, city is making their best effort to make sure that everyone stays in their schedule, and by putting the contractual requirements in place and putting the review requirements for their billing and then change orders.
Now, in addition, we have requirements for the consultant in their support of the construction contract. They have turnaround times and things like that they have to keep up with to adhere to make sure that they're responding in a timely manner, make sure they do not hold up the construction contract.
And same valid for the contractors as well.
Okay, last question. What are the lessons learned here if we don't feel like there's anything that can be improved, from my seat at least, without speaking for anybody else, this doesn't seem to be trending in a great direction. Again, recognizing that there was an anticipation, at least on the staff side, that the contract was going to be need to be amended and extended. But multiple extensions and a contract more than doubling, and each amendment getting bigger and bigger and bigger doesn't seem to be a positive trend. If there's nothing abnormal about that, I'm happy, I'd be willing to hear that. But if there are lessons to be learned, I'd love to know what those are.
I think the transparency is what we could offer, and you asked the questions of how whether we anticipated whether the construction support should be part of the original. We can look into having the large consultant contracts like this to bring in increments if it could be what it's offered. I'm not really sure it's a lesson learned, but I think if the council chooses to have that information, we can make it available. Unfortunately, there is not much of benchmarking for a project this size that we could see if the doubling amount is actually relative to the construction cost is within reason, because we are slightly over 10% as far as the consultant fee. This is within the industry standards, if you will. Whether it should have been anticipated from the beginning or whether it should have been done in increments is something we can look into. But I would like to say dollar amount wise, we are within the industry standard, try to compare the projects available in this size.
Yeah, I made this point earlier this week. I think, and I know we have a full agenda, so I don't want to belabor this, but it's less deviation from in fact, it is the industry standard. Right now in this environment, I think that it concerns me. I have concerns that the environment, the overall environment, is one that is ripe for the city to be taken advantage of. The dollar amounts have grown so large, and the default to COVID and the war in Ukraine being excuses for work taking longer. I'm sure there's some validity there, but I also have concerns that we are living in an environment right now where it's easy to take advantage of those conditions, and that the city ends up paying the price in the long run, and more specifically, the ratepayers down the road. And so I just want us to be very cognizant of that, and not simply assume that because they're following industry standard, we are assuming that the industry as a whole is operating in a way that is in the best interest of the city. Because I think that would be a mistake to make that assumption.
Councilmember, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
I just wanted to add, we are looking into those, each request we get, each claim, we do look into that. We do have an outside legal firm that's helping us assess and all those, and we also have an external auditor hired through the attorney's office that's looking at all claims and things like that to make sure there is validity to them. So we're not, we are doing our best to manage the public funds, so.
Okay. Well, thank you again for answering all these questions. I appreciate it. I certainly understand the importance of this project. I understand, that it's the biggest, most ambitious public works project the city's ever undertaken. Understand all of that. The last point I will say is to the point about meeting the diversity goals of the city. If these contracts are essentially lifetime contracts for the lifetime of the project, it makes it even more important that we're hitting those targets at the beginning. Because it's not ideal. It's far from ideal when they're not hitting the targets and it's a short-term contract. But if getting your foot in the door means getting in your foot in the door for life, then we really should be holding folks to those standards, because that is an incredible opportunity for those companies to be able to do this business with the city. And we should have expectations that they are doing everything that we want them to do in terms of having the overall community benefit that these projects should have, including who we're investing in terms of workforce. So I appreciate again the response. Thank you, Council President Pro Tem, for the time. I'll move approval of the item.
All right, thank you, Council President. Not seeing anybody else on the lights. I'll second the motion and then have a couple of questions on my own. Thank you for being prepared on an item that was pulled off consent to make the presentation. This is difficult things. This is a massive, complicated project. Much like any other project, it couldn't have happened at a worse time in terms of starting work back in 2016 and then being interrupted by the pandemic and other factors. I think, I don't know if it came across in your presentation, but some of the creativity that had to be employed to make sure that we could, given supply chain issues, to introduce other alternatives, and then having to go through the certification process to make sure those alternatives actually were working, which is a good reminder to me and frankly to all of us that this is not a project where the city inspectors go, job's done, turn on the switch, you're ready to go. This has to be commissioned, and there's a very high standard that this plant will have to make before it actually is fully operational. Not an excuse to justify numbers like this, but it is important to kind of keep that in mind. And it is often difficult, given the scale of the project, which is in excess of $1 billion, to say, well, it's only 1%, it's only a couple of percent. But still $14 million relative to what the original contract was. And based on the committee consultants' quick work, it does seem that the First and Second Amendment did come through council. So we were alerted to those change orders and discussion was had at that time. You said something I just want to give you an opportunity to repeat. One of the other items on the consent agenda was also a change order, but it was actually a result of a settlement. And the city was very aggressive in terms of assessing what the claim was and where we ultimately landed. And I think I heard you say you really went through the same aggressive exercise that the consultant said, I need X, and that you employed a lot of resources, both internal and external, to really figure out what was the right number for the work that perhaps design work had already been done,
Mhm.
the work coming up. Could you kind of reiterate that?
Yeah, actually, thanks for the opportunity. So when we started this discussion without sharing the number that we started, but I think the consultant had an idea on in their mind the level of effort that will need it for them to provide design support till the end of the construction. And among with our, I think, expertise in-house and with the third party and the legal counsel Akram mentioned, we went through approximately 6 months of negotiations with this consultant. We had multiple iterations of their proposal, and I asked them to identify the correct level of staff that needs to be perform the work in their office or at the job site. And we implemented procedures in place that every month they need to have a sit down with our staff to identify what areas they're going to work on and what is the estimated cost for that month's billing. And at the end of the month, they need to sit down and verify it with our staff. And also the subject matter experts that we have through our program coordinator. So there is extended level of scrutiny in these contracts while we are negotiating for the settlement, whether it's global or through a mediation or issuing amendments to these consultants. We do understand the sensitivity of the situation. And so I think I would like to say the effort put in to bring this consulting amendment to this other amount will be also put in to keep it in this level unless we run into something really significant throughout this construction. So.
Okay. And I know to the point the council president raised, when you look at industry standards, you're not approving contracts because we meet the industry standards, but it is one metric to look at as you're going to say, how are we doing compared? And I know that we're always trying to do better, right?
Correct.
The last thing I'll add, the council president raised, the public raised, there's a consistent concern about the lack of diversity in the contracts we issue. I haven't heard a lot of people tell us about how to deal with that since these are our goals. They're not mandates because of some of the limitations we have in the law, which I am not an expert on. But one of the things that I've noticed over the years is that with the initial bids, we often see a lot of subcontractors brought in to create that diversity across the entire team. And any way we get there, I think, can be a good thing. However, I note in this particular case, very little of the 14 is actually going to any of the subconsultants. Most of it is going to the prime. And so it would be good to know that the total, whatever goals they said they were, whatever targets they hit with the initial application continues with every amendment. That's easy for me to say. There are different job skills and different capacities of different firms. But maybe that might be something that might be helpful, especially this contracts that last much longer. And we know on day one that we're going to do amendments going forward. But that might be one tool that legally we can actually employ. It's an important conversation. It's also a difficult conversation. So with that, I see the Vice Chair, Von Wilbert, is on the lights.
Thank you. And thank you for the discussion, and thank you for the very careful briefing we had in my office ahead of time for this. One of the things that you are stuck in a rock and a hard place with is we need to continue this project. And if you had to stop at every single dispute and shut down the project to determine exactly what went wrong, who went wrong, we would never be able to move forward and the public would suffer because the cost of delay is enormous. And so I think your strategy of hiring outside counsel, having tolling agreements with certain companies which we worked with, and being able to true up at the end of this project is the better strategy, even though we will have to front the money right now to keep it going. I think the biggest hope that some of these contractors have is that we will just forget at the end of the project. And not hold them accountable and get money back. This often happens in construction litigation where money is get back at the end. But if you don't do it in the middle, if you do this in the middle of the project, they'll say, great, well, we don't want any more claims going forward. So I understand, but it took me a while. So I appreciate the complex briefing that you gave me. I'm looking forward to meeting with our outside lawyers so I can ask some more questions. But I appreciate everyone's questions here because I too am worried about the cost increases. But I do want to say that I understand now how much work you're doing on the back end to monitor and evaluate these things, but we do have to keep it going. And so we're going to have to eat cost for a bit until it's done. And then we can go back and see who wasn't the best advisor in this situation. And I know you can't say all of these things openly either because they're internal disputes that are happening with companies and you can't, just as a litigator, I'm not allowed to say everything I want to at the same time either. So I do appreciate though, everyone knowing that these costs will be passed on to ratepayers. There are other people, other contractors who are getting a lot of money from PUD that are not doing construction. So, and I don't think they should have either, but I appreciate the work you're doing here and I'm looking forward to the general overall update and items 6 and 10. But yeah, we just got to make sure we have really good records and we don't forget and we get money back from people who we want to at the end. So thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. With that, we do have a motion by the council president to move the staff recommendation on item 3. I second that motion. So Sarah, please call the vote. And that passes 3-0 with Councilmember Campbell absent. And again, thank you for being ready to step up and do the presentation.
Thank you
and
for the
thank you, Council President. I think it was an important conversation. And with that, Sarah, please introduce item 6 from the discussion agenda and item 10 from the information agenda.
Thank you, Chair. Item number 6 is Pure Water Phase 1 CIP budget, increased pooled contingency. And item number 10 is Pure Water Program update. If you are watching on City TV or the live stream online and you'd like to call into the meeting to speak, please dial 1-669-254-5252, inputting webinar ID 160-670-8143#. And to raise your hand to speak, select the raise your hand button or press star 9 if on cell phone or landline. Chair.
All right, staff, it looks like you're settling in. Please introduce yourself for record. Let us know how much time you will need.
Good afternoon, Chair LaCava and committee members. My name is Amy Dorman. I'm an Assistant Director with Public Utilities Department. And with me today, co-presenting is Elif Chetan, Assistant Director with Engineering and Capital Projects. And we also have Elizabeth Cason from our City Attorney's Office. I think 15 minutes will be sufficient for the presentation.
All right, when you're ready.
Okay. Well, thank you for this time to give you this update on Phase 1 activities in progress. Also do have a brief update on some of the early work we have started in the Phase 2 planning effort. So we'll go through the informational update. I will go over item 6, the proposed action to increase our pooled contingency for your consideration, and then I'll close with the Phase 2 briefing. Next slide, please. Okay, so to start with our schedule milestones, there are some key dates that we need to meet. These dates are in both our Point Loma permit and our agreement with our environmental stakeholders. And they are dates for completing Phase 1 construction and starting to produce all 30 million gallons a day of pure water as Phase 1 is scoped to do. And the good news is we're ahead of schedule. So the dates we have to meet are shown in yellow on the far right end of the timeline that you see. We need to complete Phase 1 construction in June of 2027 and start producing 30 MGD at the end of 2027. And right now, even with the delay that we incurred on the Marina pump station, all of Phase 1 will be done with construction in late summer, early fall of 2026. And in terms of producing the 30 MGD, our schedule is showing that that will begin in January of 2027. So we have some healthy float on those commitments. I did also want to note, although Marina Pump Station has created this delay, the majority of our Phase 1 projects, the other non-Marina projects, will be done around this time next year. So pretty excited. We're making plans to commission the partial system that will start sending water to Miramar. So construction is needed, obviously, to start producing pure water. We do also have a hefty permit with many conditions in it that we have to meet before we can actually use the water in our supply system. And one of these conditions is a local limit study. The purpose of this study is to, 1, determine if there's anything in the wastewater flowing to our pure facilities that we can't remove. So we've sampled the wastewater going to North City. That wastewater is coming from everywhere in the city north of Interstate 8. It's a large area. And we have analyzed it for over 250 compounds and have determined that very few new discharge limits will be needed. The pure facilities are robust. They can remove just about all contaminants that come into the treatment process. So that really speaks to the robustness of our purification train. Next slide. Okay, one of our other major activities in phase 1 is standing up our new pure water operations division. This division will be responsible for operating and maintaining the new North City Pure facility. Within the O&M readiness, staffing is a big lift. There are close to 50 positions to be filled, and we're more than halfway there. And more importantly, most of our supervisors are on board. All but one supervisor have been hired. And this is important because we need time to train these trainers. And as far as our senior operators, they also need time to prepare and get their new advanced water treatment certifications. So we're helping them prepare by giving them hands-on training at our test facility, and then also having them go through our training academy, which is more of a classroom style training. So our new Pure Water Ops division will also need various contracts to be in place. And these will be for chemicals and services like security, janitorial services. We also need contracts for specialized parts and labor. And just knowing that the runway to get a contract procured can take time. Staff are starting now, so they're putting together scopes of works and RFPs. And beyond that, they're also partnering with our other operations divisions who run our existing water and wastewater facilities. So the goal there is to find opportunities to combine forces, so create efficiencies, and then also potentially some cost savings if we can put larger contracts together. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Elif, and she'll go through our progress on construction.
Thank you, Amy. I'm happy to report that phase 1 construction is 60% complete. We reached we are over the 50% mark. I think it's a great accomplishment for the entire city and the Pure Water program. Just to refresh your memory, we have 12 projects in the Pure Water program, and they are built by 7 different contractors. We have to coordinate their schedules, and we will have to coordinate the commissioning through these different contractors. So it's quite of a challenging project. Also, the city awarded in $1.13 billion in construction contracts. We also have a prioritization of $114 million in pool contingency to account for the construction change orders only. The progress milestones, we plan to produce first 7.5 MGD in 2026. Like Amy mentioned, that we are going to start certain components of the commissioning later next year. And also our goal is to complete the construction of all phase 1 projects in summer 2027, with the full commissioning being completed in December 2027. Like to highlight some key accomplishments, and some of these accomplishments actually can be seen from the freeway, which we intend to look at all the beautiful buildings coming out on the Escape Mall area on UTC area. But the first facility, North City Pure Water facility, as you see on the left, exterior of the building is completed, where this is going to house our operations and the operations staff. And also now we are working on the interior build out, and all the major equipment in North City Pure Water facility has been either installed or being tested in the factory. Second accomplishments I would like to highlight is the Sabacus pipeline. This pipeline is completed in summer, right in time to be able to open the Miramar Reservoir to public for recreational activities. North City Water Reclamation Plan is continuing in construction, and the 2 of the 4 secondary clarifiers you see in the middle picture has been done with hydrostatic testing. Just to refresh your memory, each of these clarifiers are almost as big as the Olympic size swimming pool. So we have 4 of them. And on the pipeline component, we recommend tunneling under 805 with the improved tunneling equipment. And 8 out of 14 tunnels are completed. This is the risky part of our business, so we are able to pass the halfway mark on that as well. And we installed 15 out of the 30 miles of pipeline. So we are exactly on the halfway mark for the pipeline. I think it will be important to speak all about the risks that we are mitigating as we are building this complex project. And we track multiple risks since the beginning of the program. And I would like to speak about the 3 of the major ones: supply chain challenges, tunneling, and differing site conditions. When major construction began in 2021, as I mentioned, the market conditions were very challenging, and we were able to adapt all these challenges: availability of the labor, availability of the material, and continue construction operations. And designers and construction managers worked with contractors to adapt construction activities to eliminate the supply chain impacts to the ability possible. The supply chain pressures have been easing, and all major equipment has been delivered or factory tested. I think that is also a great milestone we achieved to mitigate this risk. Tunneling is always a challenging construction activity. Despite all the geotechnical studies available, we cannot identify all the unforeseen conditions, but we adapted, again, construction and the tunneling techniques to be able to continue. In some cases, we brought multiple tunneling crews, which is not an easy task. There are a lot of tunneling contractors. They are national firms, and our contractors were able to bring them on board so that we can tunnel it continuously in certain areas. And again, reiterate, 8 out of 14 tunnels are completed. Differing site conditions is something we deal with in all construction activities, but when we have multiple contractors like this, I think it is becoming really hard sometimes to control schedules and such. In all major construction now, we are off the ground, as we call it, and so that is giving us a better opportunity to forecast the construction schedules and then other components of our construction as well. So would like to speak about the outreach efforts that took place within the last 6 months. We have a proactive and robust construction outreach going on in Pure Water communities, Linda Vista, Claremont University, Miramar, and Scripps Ranch. In addition, we have programmatic outreach throughout the city and the county. Between April and July, the outreach team have received and resolved 35 construction-related inquiries, distributed 23 e-blast construction notifications to 3,500 email recipients, participated in 7 presentations informing over 300 people about Pure Water, and we provided 10 construction site tours and presentations, and I'm hoping some of you already attended those presentations. Quick update on the project labor agreements. The PLA establishes a goal that at least 10% of the total construction craft hours worked on each project to be performed by targeted workers. As of June 2024, the City of San Diego's Pure Water program has exceeded the 10% goal, with the 17% of overall craft hours being performed by targeted workers. This equates to 532 employees. The PLA establishes a goal that at least 35% of the total construction craft hours worked on each project to be performed by city residents. As of June, 23% of the construction crafts are worked on the Pure Water Phase 1 program are city residents. This equates to 1,054 residents employed by the Pure Water PLA. In an effort to increase the hiring of city residents and reach the 35% goal, City PLA management staff meet regularly with both contractors and union representatives to develop strategies to maximize employment opportunities for the city residents. June 23rd was the Women in Engineering Day. We would like to take this opportunity to highlight how women are contributing to the Pure Water program. Women represent a significant portion of the large team of city staff, contractors, and consultants who are delivering the Pure Water program. from planning, designing, and building the infrastructure need to support the local water source to ultimately overseeing the water plant operations. Women are generally underrepresented in the water sector. According to the World Bank, the employment of women at water utilities currently stands at 18%. I'm proud to say that 50% of the city employees working on Pure Water Phase 1 in Public Utilities Department and Engineering Capital Projects Department are women. And over half of these women hold senior level and supervisory level positions, present company included. So with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Amy to talk about the pool Phase 2.
Thanks, Alif. So at the end of May, we issued the notice to proceed to hire Stantec as our Phase 2 program manager. And since that time, they've started to help us get our arms around how to approach the Phase 2, revisiting the Phase 2 plan. As you know, that plan was developed in 2012, and the information that we used is dated. So we've been talking about changes that have occurred in some of those key parameters, and the main categories are listed on the slide. In addition to flow projections, there's been the advent of our new dam rehabilitation program. Because of restrictions on reservoir levels, that does constrain how much pure water we can put in the reservoir, so that needs to be considered. Also taking into account climate change this time around and changing regulations. So Stantec has put together draft numbers to help us quantify these changes, and those are now being reviewed by subject matter experts throughout public utilities. So we're going through a vetting exercise right now, trying to understand the level of change and the possible implications. And so that's a really necessary first step before we launch into considering what all the possibilities might be for Phase 2. But so that would be the next major step in the planning process. Then we can whittle that range down to a select group of alternatives to consider, and then be able to define what the Phase 2 program looks like going forward, implementation schedule, cost, and scope. So we expect that this effort will take at least all of 2025. We're putting together a more specific timeline now, as well as a stakeholder engagement plan, because it's going to be important to us to also gather stakeholder input throughout the process. So that concludes our program update. And our next set of slides pertain to item 6, the proposed action to increase the pool contingency for Phase 1 construction. So as you may recall, we set this contingency up in order to be able to fund change orders on all of the Phase 1 projects. The current budget is $115 million, and we set this back in 2021 based on the estimate we had at the time for the cost of Phase 1. In our April update to committee, I shared that we had used we had about $60 million remaining in the budget. Based on current cost information, the remaining budget has dropped now to $28 million. And this does not account for the 2 change orders that were approved on today's agenda. And so in order to get us through to the end of Phase 1 construction, we are proposing that we increase the pool contingency budget by $130 million. And this will take us to a new budget of $245 million. So it's equivalent to going from a 10% contingency to a 20%. So what's gone into our estimate is we've taken a look at the rate at which we've been encountering changes so far, and then also the 4 or 5 really large items, like the 2 today and 3 that are related to some of the marina projects. Those 5 items themselves have accounted for about $60 million in use of pooled contingency. There's not that many of them, 5 in the last 4 years, but they have had a significant impact. And so, next slide, please. So I wanted down of the contingency. Again, the estimated need was based on 2021 information. Whereas change orders are negotiated on current prices, and prices have increased significantly in the last 3 years. On negotiating the change orders, in the earlier item, there was discussion about the outside auditor and the outside legal counsel that have been brought in to support us, and they've provided very instrumental support for us. They help vet the costs that our contractors are claiming, pick apart the legal arguments. Alif can vouch for it. I've seen they've really helped us position ourselves, as we go into negotiations with these large and sophisticated contractors. I already talked about the large change order items, and then also phase one is just really complex. We typically set up 10% contingencies on standalone projects, but phase one is 6 projects strung together. And so just managing that and the complexity is a challenge. What happens on one contract, a change, can have a ripple effect on any of the others. It's really important to try to keep the schedules in sync as possible, to not have one contractor delay another and incur costs on the other projects. So that's part of the equation as well. So yes, $130 million is a significant increase. I did also want to mention that we are constantly monitoring these kinds of increases, as well as savings that we might be seeing in other parts of the program. And 2 of those savings that I just wanted to bring to your attention deal with our original estimate for construction. We got City Council authorization to award $1.2 billion for phase one construction, and the actual bids came in slightly under, $40 million under, so there's some savings there. But more than that is the SDG&E item. In 2018, they estimated $120 million would be required for them to move their utilities out of the way of our new pipelines. The Leafs construction management staff and our designers have partnered over the last couple of years to realign our pipelines, get out of the way of existing SDG&E utilities, and eliminate the vast majority of those utility conflicts. So now that estimate that was originally 120 million is down to 44. So between these 2 items, there's about $116 million in savings. We will continue to monitor both the increases and the decreases across this program in an effort to try and balance as much as possible the increases that we do have to incur. So the proposed action is to increase the pooled contingency by $102 million, $640,000. This action works in tandem with the 2 actions related to the Pure facility change order and the North City Rec plant change order. Those 2 are increasing contingency by the other 27 million or so. So it is still an increase together of $130 million. And that concludes our presentation, and would like to open it up for questions.
All right, thank you for the presentation. Covered a lot of ground there. Sarah, please proceed with public comment.
Thank you, Chair. We've received speaker slips here in chambers for items 6 and 10. We will begin testimony with Joyce Sunyata. And Ms. Sunyata, if you could please approach the lectern, you'll have 2 minutes total to speak to items 6 and 10.
Joyce Sunyata, District 3. I just joined Pure Water about 9 months ago. I'm excited, but cut me some slack, will ya? So, well, first of all, amazing work. I can't say enough. I'm looking forward to studying this more. So Joyce Sunyata, District 3, thank you, Sarah. Great job. A mammoth project, mammoth. And it deserves 23 pages of a staff report. I love staff reports. So thank you so much. I'm going to go with 10 first, and we'll just see how this all works out. So page 2 stood out to me. Regulatory compliance activities. Wow. 3 of the first of their kind reports were submitted almost 2 years ahead of the required timeline. The city has received comments on 1 of the 3 documents and is addressing those now. Comments on the other 2 documents are expected in the next few months. A question from me. Are the comments available to the public after they are received, discussed, and addressed? Can they be included in your next update? Here's a red flag. Clarify imposed requirements such as the detailed approach for data collection. Our 8 IT Panda and Kirby Brady. I just heard that our CIO, our Chief Innovation Officer, is working with in the Environment Department now. So here we go. That's absolutely required. So that everybody's collaborating on this clarification that I just mentioned. So the red flag here is data, data, data. Is that too, sweetie?
That was 2 minutes. Thank you.
That
Your
is
time
2
has
minutes.
concluded.
I just wanted to say, so go ahead and take a little bit from my other.
Oh, no, that was 2 minutes total.
Okay, sweetie. Well, can I say that this is my, okay, I'll do it this way then. Have to say this. It's going to cut into my other one.
Ms. Sunyata, your time has concluded. It was 2 minutes total for both of the items.
Oh, I thought you said 2 minutes per item.
2 minutes total for both items 6 and 10.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you. I'm sorry about that. But anyway, I love the whole thing. And
Our next speaker is Ms. Lori Saldana.
Yes, no, there's no reason to apologize. I mean, we were given 2 minutes on previous items, so if, and to the chair, you asked about diversity. I was going to comment, I didn't realize we were going to be reducing time. As former chair of the Legislative Women's Caucus, we did a lot of work on diversity in the workforce. On boards and commissions, we made sure on corporate boards, we ensured diversity. So if you ever would like some ideas on that, there are a lot of qualified people who would be more than happy to work on how to diversify the workforce. I was a union carpenter at one point. And I would visit classrooms. I would talk about opportunities in building trades and construction to students as alternatives to college. And skilled workforce and apprenticeships are a serious problem in San Diego County. We have project labor agreements with building trades, and they have abysmal records on diversity for women and people of color. So you want to know how to improve diversity, council chair or committee chair? Look at the project labor agreements and put some teeth in the diversity standards. And we're spending millions of dollars on construction jobs. I am trying to get to Clearwater, but I feel like I'm playing catch up because questions are asked, statements are made, and on previous items that we are limited to speak on. So let me say on regards to this, SDG&E has reduced some of the costs of moving items from 120 million to 40 million. Lawsuits were required to get them to come into compliance with agreements. The franchise agreement with SDG&E has 0 teeth on diversity in workforce. They never come and testify and tell you at council on updates what their workforce diversity looks like. And that needs to happen. So you want to know about contractors and franchises that are not meeting diversity to hire women and people of color in numbers that represent our diversity. San Diego Gas and Electric franchise is one of those. So there are a lot of ways to help people paying these high water bills to have better incomes if you hire them in better diversity programs. This is the first time you've brought that up, and that's just a quick summary.
Thank you for your comments. We will move to the virtual queue. I'll begin the 5-minute timer for all those to indicate if they wish to speak to items 6 and 10. We will begin testimony with the original. Please unmute yourself and provide your comments. You will have 2 minutes combined for items 6 and 10.
I got it. It's sad though, because you should be not combining them. But this is a good way to keep the people from being able to discuss things. But talk about money laundering. You're now more than doubling the amount needed. And this is just for phase 1. So it's like, how many phases are there going to be and how many more increases like this are going to come down the pipe? I mean, I'm sure it's going to be quite a lot of them, seeing what's happening and just the history of what goes on with, the spending of the people's money. And I'm just wondering because nobody knows that you're really giving people back their own sewage. I'm just wondering how you're informing the public, or do you just expect them to come to a meeting or know that you guys even exist and that you're doing this? Because like I said, I've asked people and they don't know that this is actually happening. And so are you going to put out some kind of a notice when people are getting this water, and or putting it in places to say, because, when you reclaim water and you do it, it's done for landscaping and stuff. There was purple insignia, like paint, on wherever this was coming from. So what kind of way are you going to inform the people that this is happening, as well as telling them what kind of toxic chemicals you're putting in the water that you're claiming are safe? Because it's like, we have fluoride in our water that is a neurotoxin. It's completely unsafe to even use, but we're lied to and said that it is something that is good for you. So you're telling people that it's good for them to have lye and different chlorines and chemicals in the water, but what are you doing to actually inform them? Because it's like, if there's asbestos or there's lead, right, there's a sign that says, so that people transparent that this is actually happening. You need to think about that, because if people have no idea that it's happening and then they all of a sudden have health issues later, and it has to do with this, that's a huge problem.
Thank you for your concluding remarks. And Chair, seeing no other hands raised in the virtual queue, this concludes public testimony on items 6 and 10.
All right, thank you to everybody that spoke, and I'll turn it over to committee members for questions and comments. And we need a motion for item 6. Item 10 was an information item, and we do not need a motion. Would either of my colleagues like to jump in first?
You want to start, Chair?
Sure. I really want to open it to my committee members, but yeah, we'll jump in. So thank you very much for the presentation. You made an important point, and I don't think we caught it when we did the agenda. You actually need this item to be approved to cover the construction changes that were on the previous items. Is that what I heard correctly?
Actually, those two items are also requesting to increase the contingency themselves. So with approval of those change orders can now be paid.
Okay, you told me that once and I forgot, so my apologies. And that also explains why you're bumping it by 130, but you're only asking for 102, because the other 28's picked up by those items. Gotcha. Because it's been an interest, you mentioned one of the good news coming out of this program was the goal for targeted workers. For those of us who have forgotten, what was the definition of targeted workers?
That includes veterans, includes other disabled sectors of the community. I think Alif may have pulled up the full list, but there are also disadvantaged youth within that umbrella of targeted.
We can provide the full list, council member. I need to dig through otherwise. Sorry, my apologies.
Okay, we try not to ask questions that you wouldn't imagine to come up with. And then the other thing you mentioned, or that was mentioned in the presentation, and in case anybody hears about it and kind of wonders, you're doing the water testing today, given the diverse sources of wastewater in the subject area. And it looks like, if I understood it correctly, we will need local limits for less than 10.
Correct.
What does that mean for the public?
So we sampled the water to determine if there's any compounds that our purification process can't remove. And so far, it looks like for most of those 250, it's not a problem. If there is, it's maybe pertains to 10 or fewer of those compounds. We're not done with this study yet, but if it is confirmed that they are problematic to the purification process, what we would do is we would set a new discharge limit that we would then enforce at our industrial discharge sites. So this is something we currently do to protect the Point Loma plant, similarly in the ocean environment. So we would be doing the same for our pure facilities. So the study will be out later this year. Yes.
Okay, so to put that in other words, to make sure I understand it correctly, this is not about increasing the allowable in terms of what would show up in pure water. This is actually going back to the dischargers and potentially reducing limits of what they can discharge into our wastewater system without doing their own kind of internal treatment.
Right.
So this is looking at them, not at the consumer.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for that clarification. And then I'm going to ask you a math problem that you're probably not going to be able to answer. We're 60% done with the project. How much unbilled do we have left? Unbilled.
So I think the billing we receive from contractors is lining up with that percent complete as well.
Okay.
That's what you're asking,
I'm
right?
trying to figure out for the 100 or so million that we're bumping the pool reserve.
Mhm.
How does that compare to what we still haven't paid yet?
550 million
Okay.
remains to be paid.
So that 100 is about a 20%
Mhm.
contingency of the five, roughly speaking.
Correct.
And
Okay.
about 10% of the total amount of construction.
So we've got a pretty good cushion from the experience and as Council President asked, learning from the experience that we've gone through. Okay, this is clearly in my mind a necessary action, given what we've learned, to help you all navigate and manage the project. So I'm happy to move the staff recommendation on item 6. And I'll turn it over to the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chair LaCava, for starting us off, and thank you for the presentation. My staff and I did get to go to the Pure Water plant recently for our second tour. It's been incredible because our first tour was a year ahead of time and the project was still in the ground and we got to be in the building this time. And I'm really enjoying the pink pipes to know that that is the water that's actually going to be potable. Am I right on that?
Recycle.
That's the pure water. Yes. Yep. Very exciting. And I've learned so much about this project and how complex it is in terms of the way we did the contract for the design bid build, because the design had to be approved by state regulators before you could even bid it out, correct?
Correct.
So it took years from the design, it got approved, and then you could bid it. So there's no way to do a progressive design build because it had to be approved by state regulators for water before we could build it.
Well, yes, the regulations were still being developed as we were progressing through design. So we needed to wait for the final regs to know the requirements that the facilities needed to meet.
Yeah, I mean, and that's just talk about building an airplane as you fly it. Like, it's amazing what you've had to do with this. And so for phase 2, it's going to be the same system, right? We're going to put it in open reservoir above ground. So do we need to get new regulations?
That's not known yet,
Okay.
but at least the regs are known.
Okay.
So we have the regs for putting it in a reservoir. There's also the direct potable reuse regulations that just got adopted. So
Got it.
at least that is not as uncertain as in phase 1.
Okay, got it. Understood. Yeah, and what I've been told is that the law firm, the outside counsel we're using to help mitigate construction costs is also going to help us develop the contracts for phase 2.
We're not there yet. They're on board to assist with phase 1 construction. Phase 2 has quite a bit of planning ahead before we actually have projects to talk about design and delivery methods. But we'll have that plan. We'll bring updates on the plan as we progress through 2025. And it's probably going to be into earlier mid-2026 before we have something to propose.
If I may add, actually, as far as best practices goes, as far as project management, program management, and perhaps a good lesson learned is to have the right team of consultants and legal counsel and the project delivery methods available to deliver the phase 2 program. However we proceed, it needs to be the most efficient way, and then having the proper support from the consultants and the council, it's instrumental in my opinion.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. I appreciate it. And it is just huge having the regulatory scheme known at a time. And we're pioneers in this project. You know, we're the first ones to do the.
Yes, we're the first permitted project. They used a lot of our test data in crafting the regulations. So it was a really collaborative effort with the Division of Drinking Water.
Fantastic. You're welcome. The rest of California and Phoenix and everyone else who's going to be following us. I'm glad to see we're meeting our timeline milestones, even though we've had challenges, with Morena and others. I'm glad to see that we're still on time. That's a huge feat. But that comes at a cost increase. And I get it. We, at the airport, our contingency, our added was 122 million for that project. And I'm just learning so much about the challenges in delivering things, and building a tarmac that a jetliner can withstand is a lot more complicated than it seems. Just pouring concrete is not adequate. So we're burning 3 million a day at the airport. People ask, what are you doing at Terminal 1? We're literally burning 3 million a day. We are trying as hard as we can. Really huge win on the STG&E designs. And I remember us commenting on that when this project was first approved. So thank you for your hard work on that. I appreciate that very much. Again, most of them, I wasn't intending to make comments on item 3, but I'm glad we pulled it and talked about it. So most of my comments on cost escalation, I already made, and I'm glad that I'll be meeting with our legal team just to ask more questions. Because cost increases, none of us want to see that. None of us take this lightly. But I'm happy to second the motion, and I'm looking forward to continuing the progress. My one request, though, is that we continue to get updates on the use of contingency. That's what we're doing at the airport, because we don't want to have to approve contingency again if possible. But so just every update we get on Pure Water, let us know how much is left in that buffer. That would be very, very helpful. And also, thank you for highlighting the women in water. When I was on the tour, I saw the poster and I said, I want to know more about this and how we're making sure that women feel included on this job. That's great that over 50% of the full-time city staff working on this are women engineers. That's fantastic. Bring your child to work day will have a bit different impact when they can see so many women working on this. And speaking of which, I know our chair said he's not a lawyer. I understand I am. And there was one, there's been many efforts actually that this city has tried to do, and the state of California has tried to do, to increase diversity. A comment was made about a state law requiring women to be on corporate boards. It was SB 826 in 2018. I was tasked with enforcing that law by our city attorney when I was a deputy. And I got to send letters notifying all of our corporate S&P 500 companies in San Diego of the new law. And then the state was sued. If you go to the Secretary of State's website, you will see an update pursuant to the final judgment and permanent injunction in the Superior Court in the County of Los Angeles. As of 2022, the state of California, the Secretary of State is not currently permitted to collect data on women on diversity on boards, and the publicly traded disclosure statement has revised to remove the 4 data fields collected in compliance with the court judgment. We in California are not allowed to do a lot of affirmative action. And even when we try, we're sued by organizations called the Pacific Legal Organization. This one was called Judge Watch that sued. District 7 and District 4 tried very hard to put in more teeth to our project labor agreements. And, Raul Campillo and previously Monica Montgomery Stepp are 2 of the best lawyers I know, and they're trying hard on this. So it's hard to hear sometimes when you don't think not you, but that folks don't think we're doing enough, when the law in California cabins us. We have to comply with court orders. So I want to thank you for doing the best you can, even in this legal environment where the state is sued, where we would be sued if we had more teeth that we'd like to have. That's why we have some of our diversity. But thank you for your work on this. I'm happy. Sorry for the legal rant. But we get sued when we try. So happy to second motion. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair. I'm not seeing anybody else on the lights. Please call the vote. And item 6 passes 3-0 with Councilmember Campbell absent. We'll move right into item 7. Sarah, please introduce the item.
Thank you, Chair. Item number 7 is the ratification of the emergency contract with Republic Services for the January 2024 Storm Emergency Debris Assistant Program Services. If you're watching on City TV or the live stream online and you'd like to call into the meeting to speak, please dial 1-669-254-5252, inputting webinar 160-670-8143#. And to raise your hand to speak, select the raise your hand button or press *9 if you are on a cell phone or landline. Chair.
All right, thank you, Sarah. So staff, as you settle in, please introduce yourselves for record. Let us know how much time you will need.
Good afternoon. My name is Andrea DeLeon, Waste Reduction Division Deputy Director for the Environmental Services Department. I'm joined by ESD Director Kirby Brady, and we're requesting for 10 minutes.
All right, thank you.
Our item is to request to ratify the emergency contract with Republic Services for the Debris Assistance Program and provide an update on this program's progress. City Council was notified of the sole source approval and emergency contract related to the Debris Assistance Program on February 12th of this year. This was in response to the January 22nd, 2024 storm in which the city created the Debris Assistance Program, which provides a no-cost collection to assist properties impacted by the storm. The Debris Assistance Program makes the recycling of construction and demolition debris safer, easier, and faster for residents and businesses recovering from the January storm. We offer containers as needed for proper handling, processing, recycling, and disposal for storm-related debris and construction and demolition waste. The program offers containers in the sizes of 10, 20, and 40-yard roll-off containers with a focus on construction and demolition debris collection. ESD, which provides oversight of the program with code compliance officers and recycling specialists, monitor the containers by visiting and assessing the containers Monday through Saturday. They're reporting and monitoring the fullness of the containers and reporting and responding to any observed illegal dumping and hazardous waste materials in or around the containers. We have also offered to residents that if they have any household hazardous waste in need of proper disposal, that they can contact us to provide direct door-to-door services to be picked up from their home from our vendor Clean Harbors, or they can drop off materials at the household hazardous waste transfer facility at no cost. Inappropriate use of the containers are being mitigated by posting educational signage in English and Spanish. We're also closing and locking any observed doors. Customer service and education also goes hand in hand with this program. We promoted this program through initial door-to-door outreach to homes in the flood-impacted areas with staff who speak English and Spanish, and have also distributed flyers in that process. As I mentioned earlier, we've also posted signs in English and Spanish on containers, and our services are posted on the City Storm Response and Recovery website. We also follow up with customers over the phone and through emails, and also conduct site visits as necessary. Here are some examples of our outreach materials on the slides you see before you. So our requested action is to ratify the emergency sole source contract with Republic Services for the Debris Assistance Program in an amount not to exceed $5 million through the June 30th, 2025, or until services are completed. Republic Services is our contracted vendor that provides all labor, materials, equipment, containers, and services to collect, transport, and process the materials to a certified construction and demolition recycling facility for processing. The director of the Purchasing and Contracting Department reviewed the emergency request from ESD and certified the sole source on February 21st, 2024. This program is primarily paid out of the recycling fund. In fiscal year 24, we billed about $745,000, and we still have outstanding invoices to pay this fiscal year and as the program continues. We overly estimated a not to exceed amount of $5 million out of abundance of caution to ensure that we had enough funding and can provide recovery services before the contract had ended. I'd like to share some highlights since February 2024 and share that since February 2024, we've removed over 3,000 tons of debris and continue to do so. And we've also delivered more than 125 containers. There are 36 active containers currently in use in the community. To give some context, at the height of this program, we had 52 containers actively in front of homes being used. Overall, the Debris Assistance Program has been well received by residents and businesses repairing their properties. In summary, this action is to ratify the emergency contract with Republic Services for the Debris Assistance Program. We are requesting that this program continue, though, in the meantime, because we are still receiving requests for debris containers from residents, especially as more folks receive their FEMA funding and are beginning or continuing construction and demolition of their homes. This is an essential program for the community as part of the city's swift recovery plan response that weighs many of the costs for reconstruction and helps rehouse as many residents and supports businesses with their operations as they repair for their properties. For context, if each container was paid out of pocket by customers, it's about $1,000 per pickup if it was paid out of pocket by them. This program also makes the debris assistance program more efficient by having ESD as a central point of contact to serve as a point of contact with customers and Republic services. However, as folks are rebuilding and as we closely monitor the appropriate use of this program, we're recommending that we prepare policy decisions in the future on how we want to sunset this program so that we avoid risk beyond the useful life of the debris assistance program and don't increase any potential legal dumping in the community. I want to turn over also to Kirby if she wants to share any additional information.
Thanks, Drea, and thank you all. We just wanted to give you this informational update in addition to asking for the action requested here to ratify the contract. I think what we really wanted to do is portray a balanced picture of what's happening. We know that there's a need in the community for these services to continue. ESD is prepared to continue to do so, but we also want to let you know that unfortunately there's some kind of the downside, associated with this program as well with some of the reports we received around illegal dumping. But we will look to come back to you again for any updates that you might like to see in the future as well. So thank you.
All right, thank you for the presentation. Sarah, please proceed with public comment.
Thank you, Chair. The public comment period for item number 7 is now open. We've received one speaker slip here in the committee room. If Ms. Lori Saldana would please approach the lectern, you'll have 2 minutes to share your testimony.
Thank you. Thank you for the report. I didn't see a workforce report, and I see that there are 179 employees and there are deficiencies, again, with women in terms of laborers and workers, or what is the category there? Operative workers, I guess, are operating heavy equipment. Also, a deficit in finance and sales. And likewise, a deficit with Asian employees in some of the categories. So workforce reports are very helpful. It helps to see the diversity, not only of the workforce, but also the kind of jobs they're doing. In some cases, we had a contract go out that didn't have enough skilled workers, and it wound up doubling the cost of a construction remodel project at the convention center because they had a lot of unskilled labor instead of skilled, and that is what led to millions more in outside kitchen contracts. So it's helpful to see a workforce report in these reports to understand a little bit more about it. And anytime you have this type of sole source contracting, you have an opportunity for waste and fraud. I've seen it when I was representing San Diego and we had wildfires, when we had to have debris removed from thousands and thousands of acres, and they went with sole source. And the companies that had these bids, as been mentioned before about lifetime contracts, the same companies over and over were contracted to do these cleanups. So I would really encourage, just as Sean Elo said earlier, if you're going to hire these contractors, and as we look at increased climate risk and bigger storms and more chances of flooding and fires, make sure they start off with a good track record on diversity. And the reason we have lawsuits, as Ms. Van Wilpert mentioned, is there is a vested financial interest in not having diversity. Otherwise, they wouldn't spend that money on those contracts fighting those attempts to change it.
Thank you for those concluding remarks, and we'll move to the virtual queue. I will begin the 5-minute timer for all those to indicate if they wish to speak to item 7. We will begin with the original. Please unmute yourself and provide your testimony.
Yeah, definitely sole source contracts shouldn't be happening. We should be, seeking multiple contractors to see what is the best. But when you do that, you're doing it for you. A lot of times it's, for certain reasons anyway, that aren't good. As far as this goes, I mean, it's good that you're providing this to the people, but it's really sad to see that we even have to do this, because you should have been upkeeping with the infrastructure and making sure that people didn't have to worry about having their homes demolished and torn apart and, needing these types of containers to put in the debris. It's like, and they're not even getting, you know, the help that they should be getting. They're getting subpar help in order to rebuild. And, you know, we're having builders come in and possibly buy them up for really cheap because a lot of people couldn't possibly get what was needed. Some people didn't even have insurance for what happened. So it's just sad to see that all these things that happen are like after the fact, like after there's a disaster and you want to blame it on climate change and all of this stuff. And, you know, 1,000-year storm, 100-year storm, whatever, once in a lifetime storm. There's so many things that it's been called, but it's just ridiculous that, you know, this is a way to almost virtue signal, like we're really taking care of the people. No, it's your fault that they actually need these. So you should be the ones that pay out of your pocket instead of having the people have to pay for it, because we're paying for it. We were already paying for stuff to be fixed and mitigated and taken care of that was neglected. And now we're here. So, I mean, yeah, good for them that they can have these, but you know, it's frustrating when this stuff has to happen because of your negligence in the city.
Thank you for your testimony, and Chair, seeing no other hands raised in the virtual queue, this will conclude public testimony on item number 7.
All right, thank you for public comment. I'll turn it over to committee for questions and comments and entertain a motion. And we'll start out with Council President Elo Rivera.
Thank you, Council President Pro Tem. Thank you all for the presentation here and the work on this. There's a lot of different ways that the city has attempted to respond to the needs of folks in the wake of the flooding disaster on the 22nd. And this is a small piece of that puzzle, but an important one for sure. So thank you. Is there feedback? Sounds like there's, maybe there's a little bit of problem. So I just want to say thank you for that. And I'm glad that we're formalizing and continuing the service. I am curious, Kirby, you mentioned some of the illegal dumping. So illegal dumping can take a few different forms. One of those forms would be folks who these bins are not out there for using the bins. And then there could be dumping other hazardous materials that don't belong in the bins. Is it both things that are happening?
Yes, we are seeing both types of actions along with other members from the public who do not live in this community, who are now observing that these containers are out for longer periods of availability and maybe potentially see this as an opportunity to utilize these containers, which unfortunately takes away from the residents who actually need the containers. So
yeah,
we are going to continue to closely monitor.
Appreciate the monitoring. I do very much hope that folks coming in and kind of abusing the presence of the dumpsters does not mean that the dumpsters are removed from those who need them. I'm not suggesting that that's been the impression that we're given. I just want to make sure we don't head down that path. I know that of the community work that we do as a council office, there may be no more popular thing that we do than provide large or bulky item pickups and bringing dumpsters out. I know we're in the process of considering what Measure B implementation could look like. I would imagine that one of the things that we are hearing would be welcoming these on a regular basis, on a scheduled basis, or on a ongoing basis in various communities. I'm curious though if we're like learning from what we're doing right now in response to this disaster, and thinking about ways that we may implement this on a citywide level down the road as we implement Measure B.
Thank you for that question. Yeah, there are certainly lessons learned, and I think it's fair to say, we'll be talking to you separately about Measure B and some updates about the community feedback that we're getting, but bulky item pickup is a popular one that people would be interested in having. So I think we have a lot of lessons learned from the work that we do regularly about how these containers are used, what types of things people are looking to place in them, how we're monitoring for things that shouldn't be placed in them, including hazardous waste products. So I would say that all of that would inform ultimately, what we could potentially do with bulky item pickup as well. And then know that ultimately, if that is something that the community overwhelmingly is looking for as part of Measure B as well, something that could be built into that cost of service. So I would say it's actually very helpful to know how programs like this are utilized and not under these unfortunate circumstances for an emergency, but does give us some insight into how this could work long-term.
Right. I appreciate that, it is a positive that we can pull from obviously what is overall a really tragic event and continues to have huge impacts on individuals and the community as a whole. The last question is just what communication with the community looks like at this point in time. If you could talk a little bit about how we're making sure that we're continuing to have bins in the most important places possible and respond to community needs.
Yes, we're following up regularly with customers over the phone and email if provided. We also conduct site visits, and then during those phone calls and emails, we are asking customers how they're progressing on their projects for their homes. When do they maybe anticipate no longer needing the container? That's an opportunity to have a conversation that if they do feel like their container needs to be removed, they can also tell us during that time, and please removing those containers, and we'll contact Republic Services during that time.
Is there any formal or informal communication with some of the community leaders who are on the ground and working closely with the individual residents who've been impacted?
Yes, I'm actually glad you brought that up too. We also work with volunteer groups as well. Some of which were actually requesting the containers on behalf of the residents that they were serving. So we are working with those volunteer groups and also communicating with them if they need a special container delivered just for that weekend while they're doing special construction or demolition, and then removing them shortly after.
Ooh, that's great. I appreciate that. I think that's a really important part of making sure that we're doing this in the most impactful way possible. And as has been the case since literally the day of the floods, those folks who are on the ground in the community have played a huge and it can't be overstated how important a role in being a conduit from the community to the city and ensuring that the voices of those folks who've been impacted are heard, even when their lives are in complete disarray and it may be difficult for them to directly communicate with the city. So thank you again for the work on this. Happy to move approval.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Council President. We have a motion to move the staff recommendation. We'll go next to Vice Chair Von Wolpert.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you for the presentation on this. I'll second the motion to approve. And I want to just say thank you to Environmental Services for the incredible work that has been done since the floods, being down there mere days afterwards and just seeing our city crews in almost turnouts, it looked like, in gloves and just going street after street after street. I remember seeing Renee Robertson down there just in masses of piles of things and getting her workers organized. And so I want to thank Republic Services as well and any other environmental crew that helped with this. It was devastating to see. And this is the kind of contract that by nature we do approve retroactively because it's an emergency and you have to do it right away. And we do want to approve them. I also want to give huge kudos to the council president for all the work you've done with the flood victims. I mean, you have not given up, and I know you've been out there all the time helping people and going to the county to have them do their fair part. It's been really remarkable to see the work you've done with that. And thank you. And also to the public comment around the EO reports, I agree. They are very important to read and to see. I didn't mean my earlier comments to mean they're not important. We try because we can't change something unless it's measured. So I'm just want to thank you for your work. Let us know how we continue to be helpful in debris removal. And I agree, bulk and pickup is one of the most popular programs in my neighborhood as well. Everybody loves it. So thank you. And thank you, Chair.
All right, great. So we do have a motion by Council President Ela Rivera and a second by the Vice Chair Marty Von Wolpert. A couple of questions on my end. Thank you. I know sometimes the outside public looks at the city as just one amorphous mob, but there is numerous departments and what do we have, 12,000 plus employees, and each have your respective roles. I don't want to lose the idea of what Environmental Services did to respond. I see a director way in the back that was in place at the time. It was a rather extraordinary. However, we got there. City employees stepped up and Environmental Services was right there in the front lines along with public safety and a lot of other departments. And you're still out there. It's rather extraordinary. This program is a great example of that. And I think back in February, a couple of weeks after the storm event, you just need to get something out there. And that's beyond the capacity of the city, and sole source is exactly the way to go. Do that. So thank you for that. So a couple of questions. I think I heard that actually the amount that you're asking for is a pretty generous amount. How you actually get billed by Republic? Is it by dumpster and how many days it's out there, or the tonnage that they're hauling away?
It's yes, it's per pickup and by tonnage.
Okay. And then with hope for a drier, more saner winter, is there any geographic restrictions in this program? So that if we unfortunately see something happen this coming winter, is there a flexibility to get dumpsters out in other neighborhoods?
Yes, I don't foresee any restrictions. Containers, Republic Services should be able to deliver any container within the city of San Diego. We are looking, ideally to place containers on private properties if space is available, like a driveway. Otherwise, if not, then we are placing it with permission from the resident to place it in front of their home.
Okay, hopefully that will not be necessary, but it's good to know that that flexibility is there going forward. So again, thank you for the very good work going forward. Did you want to say?
I did. I just wanted to clarify, just because of this particular program was tied to the emergency. So there were the eligibility requirements for it. I want to say that the city wanted to make sure that we were really generous, knowing that just looking at 100-year floodplain didn't really cover it for the storm that we had. So there was a combination of data that went into that, looking at reports from FEMA, looking at county data, looking at the damage assessment from the city, looking at those 100-year floodplains. And what that helped us do was to create sort of these composite areas and a map that allowed us to really see who was impacted by this storm event. But also just worth knowing, as Drea kind of pointed out, we're also evaluating when people call and need assistance, that there are site visits to conduct to see if what they're doing and the work that needs to happen there sort of meets the objectives of this particular program. So I would say that there's some geographic component to this, because this was really tied to the emergency response for the storm.
All right, thank you for that clarification. And I certainly understand that. So with that, we have a motion by Council President Elo Rivera, a second by our Vice Chair, Yvonne Wolpert. Please call the vote. And that passes 3-0 with Councilmember Campbell absent. And as was identified at the beginning of the meeting, item 8 is being returned to staff. So we will move right on to the last item on the agenda, item 9.
Item number 9 is the first amendment to the contract with EPI Environmental Products Incorporated to provide polyethylene film and replacement parts for the Enviro cover system at the Miramar landfill to increase the contract amount and extend the contract for an additional 5-year term. If you're watching on City TV or the live stream online and you'd like to call into the meeting to speak, please dial 1-669-254-5252, inputting webinar ID 160-670-8143 #. Chair.
Thank you, sir. You didn't need my cue. You jumped right in. So staff, as you settle in, please introduce yourselves for the record and let us know how much time you need.
Good afternoon, committee chair and committee members. My name is Matthew Cleary, Assistant Director for the City's Environmental Services Department. With me today is James Hay, Deputy Director for the Disposal and Environmental Protection Division. And also with me is Fritz Ortley with the City Attorney's Office. And I'll turn it over to Jim. We need 3 minutes, please.
Okay, please proceed.
Good afternoon. As Matt mentioned, my name is Jim Hay. I'm the Deputy Director of the Disposal and Environmental Protection Division of the Environmental Services Department. We appreciate the chance to present the staff recommendation for the First Amendment to the agreement with EPI Environmental Products to provide polyethylene film and replacement parts for the Enviro cover deployer system at the Miramar landfill. And some background on the equipment. The Environmental Services Department operates the West Miramar landfill and is responsible for compliance with solid waste regulations. The Enviro cover deployer system is proven effective in meeting the daily cover requirements. It was a proprietary piece of equipment to deploy the Enviro cover actual cover system for alternative daily cover at the Miramar landfill. And use of the EnviroCover system is required by permit conditions from the San Diego Air Pollution Control District. The First Amendment to the agreement will provide polyethylene film and replacement parts for the EnviroCover system at Miramar landfill for an additional 5 years and increase the contract amount by $3.8 million to approximately $6.7 million. By extending the contract and securing funding for replacement parts and polyethylene film, the city ensures continued functionality and effectiveness of this odor control best management practice. It's important to note that the funding for this equipment comes from the Refuse Disposal Enterprise Fund and is proven economically effective in that we have better control over the system and that we only have to enter the trash one time at the end of the day to provide the cover and not disturb any kind of odor impacts that may occur in the beginning of the day due to the weather patterns at the landfill or any of the other alternative daily covers that would be approved for use, such as canvas tarps, and also helps us maintain the airspace and integrity of the operation of the equipment due to less operating hours. So the request in action that we discussed earlier was to approve an ordinance to execute a First Amendment to extend the sole source contract with EPI, provide this polyethylene film and replacement part for the EnviroCover system at the landfill. And we're happy to accept or field any questions that anybody may have.
Okay, thank you for the presentation. Sarah, let's go to public comment.
Thank you, Chair. We've received one speaker slip here in the committee room. If Ms. Lori Saldani would please approach the lectern, you'll have 2 minutes to share your testimony.
I want to thank you and acknowledge the improvements that you've made to these covers. Several years ago, there were odors. My family has owned property not far from the landfill for 60 years. And so when a few years ago, odors became apparent that had never been noticed before, we contacted the air quality or air pollution control district, contacted the county. They came out and did inspections, and other neighborhoods began reporting odors as well. So that has stopped. No one has noticed that for the last few years. I think it's because you have improved the quality of maybe the products that you're using as well as the processes involved. But it did go to a hearing. It did result in a threat of litigation, which might be why I think you have a representative from the city attorney's office here today, or maybe not. But I wanted to bring this up because, Mr. Chairman, people in the community do have on the ground information that sometimes leads to necessary changes and improvements. And in the case of residents in the University City area, which I believe is your district, or maybe it's changed around a bit, but in the Claremont area, District 2, also in District 6, all of those communities were impacted by those odors. And fortunately, they were educated on how to report them to the proper agencies, and that was brought forward to the proper hearings. The changes have been made. So without community input, maybe those changes wouldn't have been made. So this is one reason I do show up. I do testify. I encourage others to testify because there are things that get missed in the very large workforce that is the city and the county until residents and community members bring it to the attention of the right offices. So thank you again for making the improvements and removing those odors.
Thank you for your comment, and I will begin the 5-minute timer for all those in the virtual queue to indicate if they wish to speak to item number 9. We'll begin with the original. Please unmute yourself and provide your comment.
Not sure why this is a single source contract either. I mean, are they the only ones that can provide this type of film? And it's interesting that, you know, when there's some kind of odor, you just like covering it up. I mean, what are the health effects of those odors? It's just like the Tijuana River Valley. It's like, are we going to find a film and put it over that and be like, it's okay, you can't smell it anymore? You know, when we have these types of facilities in communities by people who live there, what are health effects that come from that? And is putting a film over it really going to mitigate? I mean, when there's trash, even just the trucks smell as they're going and delivering the waste and whatnot to these landfills. So I'm just wondering, you know, how is that affecting people and their health? Have you tested it? Do you know? Are you just saying that it's something that, you know, isn't really affecting the people, and is putting the film over it really going to do anything? Or do we need to think about moving these places away from where they're going to be nearby the people? And then you're going to spend millions of dollars on some kind of film to cover it. And how long does that film last? Is it something that is like 10 years? Is that something you're going to have to do every year and get more films? You know, it's just interesting to see what gets done over, you know, to mitigate different things. And again, with single source contracts, I'm sure that you could have outsourced that and possibly, you know, saved the people some money, as opposed to just going to one company and giving them the contract, which you guys do a lot of the time. You just find someone and say, like, that's the only place that we can go. But again, you know, it's possibility that you need to be looking at finding other areas as well, because they still smell. It's not like there's not going to be any smell that's coming out of this, even with that film on there.
Thank you for your comment. And Chair, seeing no other hands raised in the virtual queue, this concludes public testimony on item number 9.
All right. So I'll turn it over to my colleagues on the committee for any questions or comments and entertain a motion. Vice Chair Von Wolfert.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation and for keeping in compliance with the Air Quality Control Board and all the work you do at Miramar. It's an incredible place to see. I've been out multiple times, and thank you for your forward thinking also on the organics processing plant there. That's just awesome. That's still going. I know it's not the item today, but that's still going well.
We're still working through the regulatory process. Yes.
Okay. All right. Fantastic. I think my only question is, I do believe from excellent sleuthing on my staff's team that the contract is expired. It expired in February of this year. What happened? Why didn't we renew it?
We started the process in July of 2023. There was some discussion surrounding whether or not we would continue to use a sole source or if we would put it out to bid. And after much discussions, determined that there is simply no other provider for the supplies for the system. So the ultimate decision was to pursue the sole source, and that discussion and collaboration delayed the process.
Okay, got it. We had a whole audit recently about expired contracts coming to city council late. And one thing I do want to thank you for, you didn't spend any money on the expired. I appreciate that. That's the harder pill for us to swallow, is when money expended without legislative authority. So I understand. Thank you for that. I just, out of principle, I'm not going to be approving retroactive contracts. So I won't be making a motion. Just hopefully someone at the 11th floor level can change just the process and how this all works. So thank you very much.
All right. So I'll go to Council President Hila Rivera. I'll make a few comments, but yeah, go ahead.
You want to step on your comments if you're about to. For just purposes of keeping things moving here at the committee level, I'll make the motion to move this to council, and appreciate the questions asked by Council Member Von Wolfert. Thank you.
I'm going to second the motion, and we'll go for the vote, and then we'll decide how that vote actually manifests itself and then what we have to do about that. I have a little bird on my shoulder that tells me about that, but I'll be happy to second the motion. So you went through an exhaustive analysis to determine that this was appropriate for a sole source, that if you did put it out to an RFP, EPI would be the only one that would really come in with the product that we need for our landfill.
Yes, that's correct. And we actually purchased a replacement piece of equipment to deploy this material in 2019. So while we were developing, it became apparent that if there was any material, that it would potentially become a conflict with the warranty for that second piece of equipment that was meant to be the replacement.
Okay. And it sounds like this is actually the company that produces the product and they deliver the product to us. So this is not a case where, as we often seen, somebody else has the franchise and they're buying it from the producer, and then, so this is kind of a direct purchase, which I think is always a good thing. Speaking to the comments that were made earlier, University City used to be in my district, and I used to hear a lot. And by the time it was redistricted, I was not hearing any complaints. And I know the city has been very aggressive over the years to meet that challenge of the odors. And an odor that you can go to the landfill and have your particular opinion. It's when you smell it every day that can be a little problematic for a resident. So I appreciate what ESD has done to really tackle that challenge. And then how sophisticated our landfills are. I don't think we even call them engineered landfills, but I always bristle when somebody calls it a dump. Having worked at the Miramar landfill when I was a wee child back in the day. But I appreciate the good work. And I think we have a commitment by Environmental Services as we're getting with all departments to try to improve the sourcing, whether it's a contract, a consultant, or a product like this, to bring it in a more timely fashion, because we want you to have the products you need to do the work that we expect you to do and the residents expect you to do. So with that, we have a motion by Council President Rivera. We have a second by myself. Please call the vote. Okay, so on one hand, the motion passes 2 yeses, 1 no, and 1 absent. However, we can't not move something forward with a recommendation of approval with only 2 votes on a 4-member committee. And so if there is no objection, correct me if I'm wrong, we will move this to full council without a recommendation. Or do you want to?
Do you want to take a motion on that?
Would you prefer?
Yes.
So, okay, I will move that we recommend that we move this to full council without a recommendation. Okay. Yep. And please call the vote on that. And you're still a no?
I just out of principle.
Yeah. Do we have an option to move it?
Yeah.
You only need 2 votes
Oh,
on
there were
a
none.
motion for no recommendation.
Okay, thank you for that clarification. All right, so it'll be moved to full council without a recommendation. So I guess that means we'll have to hear it at full council. Fit that into your agenda. So with that, as a reminder for anybody that tuned in late, item 10 was heard earlier in combination with item 6. And so that now brings us to the end of today's agenda. And I'll adjourn this meeting of the Environment Committee until the next regularly scheduled meeting to be held Thursday, October 17th at 1 p.m. Thank you, everyone that has participated and all the good work that goes on to make these meetings possible. We are adjourned.